All right, my guest this morning, as I just said, is Steve Pemberton, best-selling author, philanthropist, acclaimed speaker, and senior-level executive for the likes of Monster.com, Walgreens Boots Alliance, and Workhuman. Steve Pemberton's story is about defying seemingly insurmountable odds to become a trailblazing corporate executive, enlightened diversity leader, visionary youth advocate, and acclaimed speaker. His best-selling memoir, A Chance in the World, recounts his triumphant life journey and drive to become a man of resilience, determination, and vision. Now, an upcoming major motion picture, A Chance in the World, further amplifies Steve's highly motivational messages. Believe in your dreams, rise above obstacles, create opportunities for others, and most of all, persevere. Steve has never forgotten the chances that bent the arc of his life. That is why he has made equality, access, and opportunity pillars of both his professional and personal life. From his participation on several nonprofit boards to establishing a Chance in the World Foundation, Steve remains a relentless champion for those who have often been left in the shadows. His commitment to others and his refusal to accept things as they are have earned him national recognition, including the coveted Trumpet Award and the prestigious Horizon Award by the United States Congress. An experienced leader, he currently serves as Chief People Officer for Workhuman. Previously, Pemberton served as Global Chief Diversity Officer at Walgreens Boots Alliance, the first global pharmacy-led health and well-being enterprise in the world. He was the first person in Walgreens' 100-plus year history to hold the position of Chief Diversity Officer, overseeing the company's global efforts to create and maintain a diverse and inclusive environment that reflects the culture, people, and perspectives of the many nations in which they do business. We all know Walgreens. Before his post at Walgreens, Pemberton was the Chief Diversity Officer for Monster.com, where he helped the company achieve all-time growth in applicants. All right. If you go to his website, you'll have the opportunity to see the accomplishments at Walgreens and Monster. Walgreens had $130 billion, 320,000 employee. That's there at Walgreens. As I said, we all know it seems like there is Walgreens now everywhere on each corner. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than Steve Pemberton. Steve, good morning.
Morning, Mark. How are you? Really, really good to be with you.
It is really, really good for you to be with me. I am thrilled. As I said, when I read the bio, and like I said, it was interesting because I had already downloaded the book before Karen emailed me. And it was another young man that responded to me whenever I tried to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I forget his name. I would have to go back and look. But in any event,
Tony.
Yes, that's exactly who it was. And so the fact that this interview came about, I was like, yes, because again, as I said, the importance of your message, particularly in a time where we get hit with so much negativity, is important in terms of, and everybody really needs to understand that we really can impact the world in one person at a time. And I was reading in terms of, in particularly in the beginning, in the preface or the intro about why you chose the Lighthouse. But we're going to work our way up to that. Let's talk a little bit about, okay, where did all of this that I just read, that's usually my first question. Where did all of this begin? I mean, in terms of as a child or a teenager or in high school or in college or whatever, where did you kind of set sights on? I mean, because I'm looking at author, philanthropist, speaker, executive, kind of where did all that come about?
I can specifically point to a moment when I was 16 years old. I was sitting in my social worker's office. It was December 28th, and I arrived in his office about 11 o'clock in the morning. I had just escaped this foster home that I had been in for 11 years. Very dark and violent place. And as that family had promised me, if I ever tried to escape, it was going to cost me my life, and it nearly did. I still have the physical scars. And I remember Mark sitting there, watching him all day, calling families, trying to get somebody to take me in. And I don't realize at the time that I'm the most difficult kind of child to place. I'm 16, I'm black, I'm male. I have this enormous case file following me around that shows nothing but difficulty and challenge, none of which was my doing, just things that I had inherited. And you sit there and realize that you have no place in the world. There's nowhere for you to go. You don't know what you're going to be doing that night or where you're going to be sleeping that night. And the most interesting thing to me was, as I watched him call family after family, and I was watching his body language. So I knew by the way his shoulders slumped that he had been told no before he even turned to me to give me the answer. And that was enormously frustrating. I remember being very angry because I hadn't done anything to deserve that situation. I didn't have any memory of family, of mother, father, don't know where I've come from. I'm this, 16-year-old biracial kid. Don't know what my, what my mixture is.
Right.
Because I have a blonde afro, blue eyes, light complexion, and a Polish last name of Klakowicz. So at that moment, you're just this collision of labels. And my reaction in that moment was not that I don't have any place to go. I mean, it was urgent. I knew that for sure. But I remember saying to myself, this is never going to happen to me again.
Exactly.
I'm never going to be in a situation where my fate is going to be dictated to me by a series of desperate phone calls in the middle of the holidays. So whatever I need to do to get control of my life, where I can make the decisions about my life, I'm going to do. And it became like most formative experiences that create life philosophies. And that experience I remember like it was yesterday.
Well, see, no question. And interestingly enough, in the first hour, and you heard me talking about it, I did a whole section on PTSD, about traumatic experiences in youth or in adulthood, how it shapes. And it was interesting. I just heard you say, I will never, ever allow that to happen to me again. Because clearly, as I said in the first hour, we were talking about trauma. That had to be a traumatic experience for you as a child. And especially, as you said, you're sitting there looking at them on the telephone, and you could see from his facial expression and body language that they had said no. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I think those things are seared into your memory.
They are.
There's still, even all these years later, my urgency with which I live life and the relentlessness of it is because somewhere in the back of my mind is the imprint of that experience. And a feeling, though it's not factual, a feeling that at any moment I could wind up back in a situation like that. Now, that's not true.
Right.
But when you have an experience like that, it does leave certainly an impact that stays with you. Now, in my case, though, it turned into something that was quite positive, but it can also go the other way.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's why I say, and this is what we're leading up to, because just listening to now as you share that part, now it makes a whole lot of sense in terms of the memoir, A Chance in the World. So,
yes, I mean, what I would come to learn later on in life was that I had inherited a multi-generational legacy of family separations and child orphans. I was the third generation to be orphaned. My father was orphaned. My grandfather was orphaned. My mother passed away at 40. My grandmother passed away at 40. as did her mother before her. I was simply the next generation up, is all. And that was all symbolized by a diary entry of a babysitter who was tasked with picking me up from my mother. My mother was an alcoholic. It was a losing battle. She was in the middle of that losing battle. And so one of the things that she would do is she would call a friend and say, hey, can you come get Steve? And I have to go, for a job interview, or and I'll be back later in the day. Well, some days she came back, and some days she came back a week later. And after seeing this cycle, the babysitter says, in this diary entry, says, drop little Steve off at the latest caretaker. His mother is contracting him out to, she said he cried his heart out. This little boy doesn't have a chance in the world. Now, when I saw that many years later, I had a different reaction to it. Because in many ways, Mark, it symbolized what any of us wants, really, is a chance in the world, don't we? I mean,
that's correct.
And in our lives, maybe we are that chance for somebody else. And so for me, it was, not a chance in the world. It was more like a life mission, actually, because that's what I wanted, just a chance, not a lowered bar. I just wanted a chance. And you get to a certain point in your life, too, where you realize that you can also be a provider of chances, too.
That is, and see, I'm still a little emotional from the first hour, and now as you're talking, I've shared with folks, even men, yes, men do cry. So I'm going to do my best not to cry as you share in this story. But you're absolutely right in terms of, so you took what was said, he does not have a chance in the world, and you flipped that around and said, oh, yes, not only do I have a chance in the world, but I'm going to make a chance in the world for others. And see, this is where, as we're working our way up to the Lighthouse Effect, where, it really, again, is beginning to connect here. And for listening audience, I need you to collect. Now, Steve, connect. And listening audience, forgive me, because you hear some of the same stuff every week, but I share it with my guest. When I'm not doing radio, my day job is principal of a school. And the school that I happen to lead right now is a single gender school. It's an all-male school. It's a leadership school. And in many cases, our boys come from all different types of backgrounds. But what we do is exactly what your mission is there, and it's to help them understand, yes, you do have a chance in the world. And we do that by helping them understand their ancestry, building their self-esteem, doing a lot of social emotional work, of course, the academics. But it is amazing for me how that entry, because it's so many times something an adult has said that will impact the child. And that's why I'm always on my guidance counselors. I'm always on my teachers that don't you ever tell a child they're not college material. Don't you ever tell a child what they are or cannot do. Because if I hear about it, I'm going to go after your license myself. Because like when a child hears or sees something like that, like you said, in your case, it spurred you in the positive. For many kids, it takes them down a well that they can't get out of.
Very true. And, there's a pivot to be had. And I have no doubt that that's what you're doing at the Academy. And that's part of your message. One of the things that I wish somebody had told me then, I would come to learn it. But, teachers, counselors, staff, folks serving lunch, those on the front lines of taking care of children see firsthand things that certainly are very difficult to see. A child not coming to school fully clothed or always hungry, or, you get a sense there's some turbulence going on at home, and they show up in behavior in different kinds of ways because
Correct.
Children don't have the language to communicate what is unfolding for them. Some adults, Mark, as you know, don't have the language, let alone children. And so when you see a child showing up in a certain kind of way, the things that you say, well, there is not a chance in the world, or you won't be college material, is only further adding, to a message that they're already getting from another place. But I'll tell you that there's another way to go about that. And it's something that I came to learn, is that the struggles I found myself in, numerous foster homes, violent places, hospitalizations, malnourishment, struggling to be seen, to be heard, I was also developing a skill set of resilience.
Correct.
So I thought faster than most people because I had to. It was a survival mechanism. I had to be solution-focused. So I couldn't get caught up in what wasn't. I always had to be focused on what could be. I was then and am now an avid reader. And so though I didn't talk a lot, I read voraciously, and that gave me vision, values, a sense of a different world beyond the one that I was living in. And so I began to develop this idea that it's not always going to be this way. And so I sized up the world by whether or not you would help me realize that vision that was in the books that I read. And so there is enormous power in a teacher's ability to shape that different kind of message, even if you don't fully understand what is happening in that child's life.
You are absolutely 100% on target. Now, interesting, I just heard you said you're an avid reader. I'm an avid reader as well. As a matter of fact, this show is in its 21st season, and the reason it was put together 20 plus years ago was because the station manager was looking for someone to do a show on books, because the hope was that we would spur or encourage people to read more. And so I've been on the air now since 2001, and I can't tell you the countless number of authors and folks like yourself I've had on the show, with the hope that those who listen will actually begin to read more. And you're absolutely right. There is a connection between being able to, reading, comprehending, and then, putting in your imagination or in your dreams of, that's going to happen for me one day. I mean, I've had the opportunity to travel the world. I mean, I've seen the Eiffel Tower. I've seen Big Ben. I've been to China. I've been to Italy. I've been, in the gondola rides and this and that. But those were things that I read about as kids. As a kid, those were things that were in books that I, one day I'm going to go there. And so now whenever I see something in the movies or on TV, or I see a shot of the Eiffel Tower, I can say I was right there standing under that. Right. Whenever I look at Tiananmen Square, I was there. I took pictures there. So you're absolutely right in terms of being able to read and place things in your spirit and in your mind's eye in terms of, all right, it may be like this now, but this is not the way it's going to be. And that is one of the messages we try to get across to our students as well. And see, what I see here is based on, I heard that word resilience. And this is the second time in 2 days that word has come up. Yesterday, I showed a video to my students with Kobe Bryant. And Kobe was talking about the Mamba mindset. And one of the Mamba mindset word was resilient, was in there. And matter of fact, when it came up, I even asked the boys, what did he mean by the word resilient? And, and so you're actually right. As we go through these trials and tests and everything, it does build your resilience. But see, this is what I find special about you in terms of, okay, you had those experiences, but now you're looking to make life better for somebody else. It wasn't one to make you bitter. It was something that made you better. And now not only do you want to be better, you want to make others better.
Well, it became clear to me from the people who came into my life at different times, some temporary interactions and others of longer duration. But as I, kind of look down the road of the journey that has been my life, I realized a couple of things. One, if it weren't for those people, the arc of it all could have been different. The second is that in what they did for me, they were in essence saying, if not in word, then certainly in deed, that our involvement in your life was not free. You have something that you owe now.
Right.
And so, achieving everything that others said you could never do, not having a chance in the world, that in and of itself is not sufficient. Your victory is not sufficient. The question now is, for whom will you be their victory, and show them a similar kind of path, and not from a place of kind of exalted status and wealth and celebrity and all those things, those kind of false markers of success.
Right.
It's more about the difficult times, the times that you were uncertain. When I should tell you that the origins of A Chance in the World, Mark, came from a conversation actually with my then 6-year-old son, Quinn. Speaking of reading, one of our morning rituals when he was that age was to read The Lion and the Mouse. We were reading it on a Saturday morning. We often did before his younger brother and their younger sister and mom got up. And he always had questions about The Lion and the Mouse. But one day he wheels around on my lap, and he has a question about, not about that story, but he has a question about my story. And he asked me if when I was a little boy, did I have a daddy? And I said no. And he says, well, what about a mommy then? And again, I say no. And he's really confused because he's never known a day in his life without mom, without dad, right? He's seen mommy's mommy, and he's seen mommy's daddy, but he hasn't seen mine, and I never talked about it. So, you could see where he came from, and you could see where mom came from. He just didn't know where I came from.
Right.
And so in the course of basically answering that question, that's how I came to write the book, because I realized that he and his siblings were going to want, the answer to that. Quinn's 21 now. He's a junior in college. And he and I often talk about how that conversation when he was just 6 years old and what it has led to, something that is a book that has become a global imprint. I get messages from the places that you've traveled because, the story of the orphan, Mark, is a global story.
Right.
And it ties back to child. In just about every culture, you will find the story of the orphan. In fact, some of the superheroes that we grew up with, they all had different powers, right? But
correct.
They all had something in common. Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, Harry Potter, were all orphans.
That's correct.
So Charles Dickens wrote about orphans. So just kind of universal story. And I was on the receiving end of those stories. And I did not realize, I should tell you, I thought it was just a family history. I was writing, that future generations of Pembertons would, pull down.
Correct.
And then from the first week, I started hearing from people quite literally all over the world who downloaded the book on Kindle. And, that was in 2012, the beginning of 2012, when the book was published. Now, 10 years later, I still hear from people every day.
Well,
either read the book or saw the movie.
As you say that, because I see you put that in the preface in this book here about the Irishman. Because you say here, let's see. The very first response I received was from a 73-year-old Irishman who wrote to share that he too had experienced great losses in his childhood. But because of what I had written, he could now go to his final rest in peace. In another part of the world, a young mother from a remote African village shared that she had read my books to her young children as an example of the importance of perseverance. When we share our life stories, we invite others to share their own. and in doing so, offer ourselves a chance to find a common narrative, a more unifying story of family, faith, fortitude, and forgiveness that transcends distance and difference. Now, I'd already highlighted that piece that I was going to read that, but you brought it up, so I said I'll bring it in now. But that's what I'm saying. That's what the beauty of this is, and I didn't realize the other book, so I'm going to download that one when I get home today and start reading that one as well. So I'll be reading both of your books simultaneously. But again, you having the opportunity, because a lot of times things that we go through, we wonder and we question why me, this, that, and the other. And we really sometimes don't understand that we're going through something in order to be able to help somebody else in the future.
Mm. Yeah, and one of the ways that any of us can learn that is by sharing our story.
Correct.
Because we navigate the world through the label: race, gender, city or town where you grew up, where you work, where you stand on a political issue, and those are certainly elements of our life experience. The problem that we find ourselves in this day and age is that we think that that's all that there is to someone. If the most important thing that I think I can ever know about you is based on the things that I can visually see, then I miss the opportunity to find those common threads and those common narratives. And I learned this as I was researching my own family history. So I didn't have any memory of my mother and father. I didn't know where I'd come from. But I go on this multi-year search for my biological family, and this is before, Ancestry and 23andMe, and so I managed to find them. One family who had immigrated here from Ireland, and the other family who had immigrated from the West Indies. And if you put the two families side by side, society says, well, that family's white and that family's black.
Right.
And you could assume that there were different experiences in America. You'd be wrong. They're very similar experiences, actually, including the loss of my parents had a devastating effect on both families because they both died very young.
Right.
So, this idea that, we kind of walk through the world, you certainly see this in our politics, you see it in our interactions, you see it in the way we are marketed to, pitched to by society, because it's a business model, Mark. I mean, you can get votes and you can get eyeballs and you can get clicks. But when you really sit down across from someone, and enter into a conversation believing that there's something that I have in common with this person, even though I can't at first see it. And that's what's so much missing in the world. And I learned that firsthand through the people who write to me. And then the second thing that I would say about one's own journeys is that when you do share your journey, you realize that somebody needs your story.
Correct.
I have a lot of aspiring authors who write to me and want to know how I did it. And I'm like you, I have a day job. It's not as an author or a writer. There's a lot of them are on the fence about whether or not they should proceed with this. And, well, there's two things I say to them. One, if you have a story, you cannot let it die with you. If nothing else, let that motivate you.
Correct.
The second is that sometimes the pain of our past is a present reality of somebody else, and they see in our victory the possibility of their own. And the challenges that any human being goes through, how do you develop resilience? Well, you develop resilience when, as you rightly point out, that it is giving you a skill set. And then somebody sees in you, so it is possible. So it can be done. If you were walking past me or saw me on a video, you would have no idea, by and large, unless I told you. You have no idea of the journey, right? That's true for every single one of us.
Right.
Every single one of us.
Well, and again, you just said something now. I'm going to have to go back on the tape because I'll pull out something that was said during the interview and quote it on my Facebook page. But it's something that you just said about the past and the present reality for somebody else. I got to go back and get that one because that one is quotable. and I'll tag your name to it. I'll go back and get it down word for word. But that was deep in terms of, the past or the pain of the past is somebody's current reality. I can't even say how you said it. But it was right on point. It's somebody's current reality for them now to have victory. And see, I sit here and listen to you in terms of going from now the orphanage to the global chief diversity officer for $130 billion, 320,000 employee Walgreens. How does that happen? And now you're at Monster.com, chief diversity officer. And it was interesting that you were just talking about the history of your two families in terms of one being West Indies and one being, was it Irish?
Yeah.
And you would wind up
from New Jersey, as you point out.
That's right. There you go. From Jersey. There you go. And then you're now working in diversity.
Well, no, actually, so I am my career path. I began actually in higher education as a college admissions officer, and I went to Monster.com at the beginning of the acceleration of .com. So I entered into the business world, which is where I've been since. I went from Monster to Walgreens, and now I am the chief human resource officer for a company that's co-headquartered in Ireland and in the United States called Workhuman.
That's what I mean. It's like it's just like, and in my mind, there's no such thing as a wasted experience. That everything it connect, good, bad, or good, bad, ugly. They somewhere along the line, it all connects into something that we wind up doing, and it just sounds like your background made you perfect for these diversity positions. Listening audience, I truly, I really hope you've been with me since 6, but I really, really hope you've been with me since 7, because my guest this morning is Steve Pemberton. We're talking about his work in terms of, his books that he's written, as well as corporate work that he's done. And we're working our way up to his latest book, which is The Lighthouse Effect. And I'm reading this here, and I read this and it was like, that makes again, it makes all the sense in the world of why he chose that title, because that's usually one of my questions. Well, how did you come up with that title, so forth and so on? But it says, the lighthouse is a perfect symbol for what I have learned from others' lives. In a flat world, the lighthouse is the tallest structure in the sea. Set amid this alternately peaceful and turbulent environment, the lighthouse is noble, selfless, steady, and faithful. It requires no recognition and seeks no reward. Rarely, and this was a good point, I never even thought about that. Rarely will you see a name on a lighthouse. Its identifying features are found in its beautiful and poetic design. The lighthouse does not judge or ask how the traveler has come to be in danger. After all, it finds itself in the same storm. Neither does it concern itself with socioeconomic status or the political party to which the voyager might belong. The lighthouse has but one mission: to protect the journey of the traveler. So we're working our way into the lighthouse effect. We went from, chance in the world, which clearly now I find it interesting that you turned it from he doesn't have a chance in the world to, oh yes, not only do I have a chance in the world, I'm going to have others are going to have a chance in the world also. And now you explain very clearly there how you came up with that lighthouse. So let's talk a little bit about that.
When A Chance in the World became a bestseller, my agent was asking me what I wanted to write about next. And oftentimes what happens, Mark, is that the author does a follow-up. And they, in essence, write about another dimension or aspect of their life story, which my instinct said, don't do that. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was I wanted to do next. And so that's why there's such a long gap in between books, because I just knew I didn't want to write about me again. I had done that. And so I just said, well, it'll, good Lord will show me when I'm ready to see it.
Right.
So, and what I came to understand is that over these past 10 years, I have been on the receiving end of so many other people's stories. And while I always appreciated the fact that they enjoyed my story, the stories that they would tell me about their own lives amazed me. And when I think on a daily basis, you're on the receiving end of that many stories, and you see the strength and the conviction and the goodness of people, I think it was the first inkling that, okay, maybe I should be writing about them. And as soon as I had that first whisper, I said, aha, yes, that is it. I was asked to give the commencement address at Providence College back in 2019. And, you've been to commencements, and, commencement speakers always have a tough job because the day's not about them.
Right.
And the best thing that they can do is be brief and be gone. And so, I in essence told the organizers, I said, I want to go out amongst the graduates on the day of, and I want to hear who's there for their graduation. I want to hear what they're going to go do with their lives. And the stories they told me in the few minutes before the commencement address, I turned into my commencement address, in essence. And then this other moment of serendipity, I guess, was as I was driving I was living in Boston, then as I was driving from Boston to Rhode Island, I passed some lighthouses, and I think that too was the combination of both the physical structure that was the lighthouse and what it symbolized. Very similar to the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad.
Correct.
The railroad, right, is a physical structure, but it has this deeper connection of these universal themes of humanity and freedom and opportunity. Well, the lighthouse, to me, as a physical structure, is just like that. It's probably the most selfless one in the world. Because I'd say the lighthouse and the bridge are similar in the sense that they serve no purpose other than to be of service to something or someone else.
Correct.
You can't pay a bridge. You can pay across a bridge, but you can't pay it. You can't pay a lighthouse. And the lighthouse, as a technical matter, we don't really need anymore because of technology.
Right.
Global positioning systems and electronic navigational charts, so you don't need them. And yet there are 23,000 of them across the world, including 11 lighthouses in New Jersey. And I think they're there to serve as a guide, not to navigate the sea, but to navigate humanity.
Correct.
To be selfless, to be resilient, and to protect the journey of another, either by directing their path or correcting their path. For any of us, we all had lighthouses in our life, human lighthouses.
Correct.
In our life. I wrote about, in the Lighthouse Effect, I wrote about these 10 people who I encountered along my life journey as a young boy, as a younger man, and I found their lives to be extraordinary. And so I wanted to share with my readers what motivated these people and continues to motivate them. In each instance, Mark, they suffered something that could have broken them, and it didn't. And in fact, their reaction to it and the lessons we can take from their lives is exactly what we need now in a time of relentless division and polarization that would suggest that we don't have anything in common. Well, if I put these 10 people in front of you, you wouldn't know their story just by looking at them. You wouldn't know who was a Vietnam War veteran. You wouldn't know who saved 18 people on the morning of 9/11, who had the diagnosis of autism, who watched his father die in his arms of a heart attack when he was 16, who lost a child to a mental health crisis but founded a nonprofit. You just wouldn't know their story just by looking at them. And so you're right. I was certainly trying to suggest to all of us that there is a way for us to live, learn, lead, and unite in a time that so desperately calls for it.
Well, I will tell you, it is a perfect metaphor. It really is. And I don't know, are you familiar? Because a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago now, 60 Minutes did a piece on a gentleman who has something called StoryCorps.
I did see that. I sure did.
And StoryCorps kind of gets at this same notion of trying to bring opposites together and let them understand just how many similarities we do have. And just as you just said, you wouldn't know from looking at folks what their story is. Just as we pass each other on the street or in the elevator or wherever we are, we don't know what each other's story is until we have an opportunity to sit across and to share with each other. And like you were saying earlier, you would be, I think, and that's what I think is the impetus of, or what's behind StoryCorps, is you would be amazed at how much of our stories really are similar. Because you said even though you had part of your family, on one side was West Indies, the other part was Ireland, the similarities were striking. Even though folks would just see black, white.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So you and I are an example. Now, you and I are talking, for the first time. But I go into a conversation thinking there's something Mark and I have in common. Now, I don't know what it is, but there's got to be something that we have in common.
Correct.
And one thing immediately, and what we would have, what do you and I have in common that nobody would know unless we told them? Well, we have ties to New Jersey. My mother's family is from New Jersey, Tuckerton area specifically. And I, 25 years ago, married a Jersey girl. Now, you, of course, that's home for you. And so you and I have something to talk about that is beyond, how do you feel about one issue versus another issue? We're both members of historically black fraternities.
Correct.
So we could laugh and joke about who's better,
Right.
I mean, so if you go into every conversation thinking there is something I have in common with this person, I just have to do a little bit of digging to find it. And it just kind of lowers tensions a bit. And even the things that are different, you realize that they're not so different that you can't overcome them. So you and I could, let's say, vote differently, be different parties, but get you and I to talking about the importance of mentorship for young black boys. Whatever those political differences would pale in comparison to what we have in common and what our life's work has been. And that's true for somebody in rural Montana, talking to me who's in the Chicagoland area. I have something in common with that white man from rural Montana. I don't know what it is, but I bet you if we sit down for a conversation, we could have it.
Correct.
But that in and of itself is not sufficient, because now you can share those commonalities of stories, but that has to be applied towards some greater good. And that greater good is finding humanity and letting others know that we have that common humanity.
Bingo. That common humanity. That's what I say. It is always kind of flummoxed me in terms of, and I theoretically, I got it. I get power. I get the economics. I get,
right.
So I get it. But it's always been fascinating for me in terms of us always focusing on the differences and making difference something bad compared with focusing or using the differences as an asset. In other words, I think when Jesse Jackson was making his speech years ago, he talked about grandma's quilt, about how all the different patches on the quilt is what made the quilt beautiful. It wasn't one color quilt. And that's where it's like, as we come together, and since you're in diversity, and I did a little bit of work in diversity as well, it's like, why not celebrate the difference in you and the difference in me and use that as an asset? And then as you come together with your similarities, then you really got something going on.
Well, if you think about two of our most enduring systems in this country, and beyond, a democracy is largely anchored in diversity.
Correct.
And what really is democracy? Well, a system of checks and balances across, three branches of government. Said differently, that's diversity of thought. The founding fathers of this country came from a monolithic system where the king decided your fate, who you could worship, how much you could be taxed. So when they constructed this government and the idea of a democracy, they said you need people who see things differently to form a more perfect union. Now you have gaps and challenges, but as an idea, democracy is woven into the construct of government. And when we get ourselves in trouble is when we forget that. The other system, the first and most fundamental principle of investing, is also one of the rare times that we use diversity as a verb. Diversify.
Correct.
Get in front of a money manager, and the money manager says, well, we want to mitigate risk by spreading out that risk against a number of assets, a number of different portfolios, for example.
Right.
So, no, we're not going to put all your money in one specific fund because, well, that fund could collapse. So it's one of the rare times that we use diversity as a verb when it comes to investing our money. But the fundamental principle of it is that's how you mitigate risk, by having differences of opinion, but understanding that you need those differences of opinion so you can make the most fully informed decision. And so when you're sitting around leadership tables, and I always get a kick out of that phrase, great minds think alike. And I think, well, yes, that's true. But there's an inverse of that statement, which is somebody in that conversation is redundant.
Right. That's right.
So if you look at you could go through time and you could look at collapses of businesses. Why do businesses fail? Why did the Challenger space shuttle happen?
Right.
It was because there were differences of opinion about an idea that weren't brought to the surface. So I have a team of 60 people across the globe. Mark, I'm always asking them, what don't I see? I ask women around me, what don't I see? Because I'm not a man. I ask people who are disabled. I ask people who are gay. Things that I'm not, I want their perspectives and opinion because that helps me to make the most fully informed decision. That's why diversity matters. That's why diversity matters. So, yes, it matters in the traditional constructs of freedom and access and opportunity, which, as certainly as black people, and brown people, and disabled people, and gay people who find themselves sometimes on the periphery of society, yet those things matter. But it's also necessary for all of us as a matter of our own sustainability and longevity.
You're absolutely. And see, again, you brought up another, to me, profound point in terms of the use of the word diversity, particularly when you start talking in, like you said, money management. Now, that was a different perspective, but exactly the very thing that while we won't necessarily appreciate it from a humanity perspective is the very reason they are appreciating it from the money management perspective.
Exactly.
So that's extremely interesting in the way, again, the way you put that. I'm going to go back again to the book. You say here, we need, and I agree, I couldn't agree with you more. We need the symbolism of the lighthouse now more than ever. In the film The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Samwise Gamgee paints a vivid picture of the great need for these timeless structures. How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad has happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something even if you were too young to understand why. Folks in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, but they didn't, because they were holding on to something that there's still some good in this world and it's worth fighting for. Now, this is what I've been saying the entire time we've been talking in terms of, especially for me, these last 2 years dealing with this virus, this pandemic has been a challenge of I have not seen a higher magnitude. And then when you couple it with everything else that's going on in the world. And so if there ever was a need for folks to have something to hope for and to understand, like this passage just said, that yes, it's going to pass. And yes, a better day is going to come to shine. The sun is going to shine even clearer. So this is a message that really needs to get out. And folks, again, the book is The Lighthouse Effect. And matter of fact, let me read the the subtitle of it. Let me pull it up for me so I can actually read it as it says. How ordinary people can have an extraordinary impact in the world. See, because the thinking is, and because that's the way news and everything, news works on bad things happening. That's what news gets paid for, is to be able to report bad news. But the truth of the matter is there is a lot good that's going on in the world also.
Yes, and it happens in the small places. If I was sitting down with your audience, let's say we're all in the room, and I said, okay, tell me who your human lighthouses were, and you just wrote that down, and I put some guardrails and said you can't name anybody in your family because this mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle, they're kind of supposed to be lighthouses, and what you'd write down are the names of an elementary school teacher, a high school coach,
correct,
first boss. Those are the people who would be on your list. And then I said, okay, now I want you to tell me why. What attributes of the lighthouse did they represent for you? So for the high school teacher who took me in that night when I was 16 years old, John Sykes was his name. And so what was his lighthouse effect? Well, like the lighthouse, he turned my doubts into a destination. The woman who brought me books when I was a young boy, years later I would meet her and ask her, well, why'd you do that? And she said, I was doing what my mother told me to do, give from where you are with whatever you have. And in her case, all she had were used books that her boys no longer read. When you begin to shape the world that way. And then the third exercise is I would say, okay, so tell me for whom are you the lighthouse? Now that one we got to think about a little bit longer. And whatever it is you write down, here's the beauty of this, Mark. You will never get the answer to that right. You'll never get it right. Because you never know. The lighthouse never knows who sees it. You never know for whom you are the lighthouse. We spend so much time in this society looking to public figures, celebrities, people with big names and reputations. We're so busy looking for lighthouses that we forget that there are those looking at us as the lighthouse. There are people looking at what you're doing at the academy who you may never meet. And they say, okay, so this is possible. And that's true for every single one of us. Those, folks getting up working 2-3 jobs on the front line of a pandemic. And you're just never aware that your life, just as it is, with all of its ups and downs and its imperfections, that in and of itself is a lighthouse for somebody else. You don't need to be wealthy. You don't need to have crowds cheering your name. You don't need to have a lot of wealth to be a lighthouse to someone else. In fact, you probably already are, and you just don't know it.
Wow. There is a song in the church that's called Let the Light from the Lighthouse Shine on Me. And I'm going to play that song because whenever I finish the interview format, I go back to the gospel music format. So I'm going to play that in the 8 o'clock hour, somewhere along the way, just based on our conversation today. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. And you were right. We never know. Well, first off, we got to live a life in a manner that would allow us to be a lighthouse. But we never know who we're being a lighthouse for. You're right. Unless, because it's interesting enough, when you said grammar school teacher, immediately my second grade teacher came to mind, Miss Royster. And she came to she was at my 50th birthday party, and she's still alive for that matter. Wow. But she came to my second grade teacher was at my 50th birthday party. Again, in terms of other mentors, Dr. Joseph Fulmore immediately came to mind. Whenever I was doing my master's in education, the dean of that program, Dr. Michael Chiricello, he came to mind. There's Reverend A.M. Tyler, he came to mind. So you're right. As soon as you started talking about name somebody who was a lighthouse house for you, I could just go, that exercise would be relatively easy. And now you have the second question and the third question, and it might get a little bit more challenging. Like, who are you? So yes, it's a wonderful concept if people, and that's why I say it's a very important book to make you think. And I see, like you just said, and I saw the names listed here: John Sykes, R.J., F.L. Kirby, Greg Anthony, Rick Rock, Carmen Ortiz McGee, Wells Remy Crowther, Monica True, and Rajiv Tipnis, Claire Levin. And then the last chapter is Setting Your Sail for Home. The book is The Lighthouse Effect. Now, I was looking through on your website with your A Chance in the World. Is that a children's version of that?
It is.
Okay.
I wrote that because of, again, the responses that I was getting from young people for whom, my story had a particular appeal. Foster care in America is a humanitarian crisis that we're not talking about. And so I wanted to write something for that younger version of me. Had I read a story like mine in the 4th, 5th, 6th grade, it would have had a transformative effect on my life because I wouldn't have felt so alone.
Well, and that's why I asked the question, because like I said, I'm in a school where I have those age kids, and now I'm thinking about ordering some copies to have them be able to read that story, because this is the thing, and we tell the boys exactly what you just said. Because of the way our school is structured and its size, we get a chance to tell them things and discuss things with them that when we were kids wasn't discussed with us at that age. And we always tell them, we're giving you a head start because the way we're talking with you and helping you understand the world and how things work, that wasn't shared with us at this age. So the fact that you just said, if I had a book like that when I was so now that's really kind of encouraged me to say I have to get a copy of the children's book. And who knows, I may wind up getting an entire set to have the boys read it, either as a class or what have you, because that's what I'm talking about.
Here's what I appreciate that, Mark. So here's what I'll do. If you decide to do that, I will personally sign the book for the boys with their names in it, and so I can do that through just book plates, and so they would each get not just a copy, but I would make sure that I would personalize it for them, so that they know it was that somebody was thinking about them as they were writing it, because I definitely was.
Okay, so then that's something I'm definitely stay in touch with you after we finish the interview and so on, because we can make that happen. It would be just a matter of me, doing what I need to do on my end to be able to order it and buy it. And I don't know, hopefully they won't go through like a whole vendor process, but that's offline. But anyway, in terms of
we'll take care of that.
Right, in terms of getting names and kind of stuff like that to you we could definitely do.
I'll handle all that.
And I see there also, I see the movie. It says A Chance in the World, the movie, and I see the hard copy book as well as the Lighthouse Effect book. So if you go to Steve's website, it is his name. It's just the same way that I do my website, the same way he's doing his website. It's stevepemberton.com. Am I correct?
StevePemberton.io.
.io. That's it. Okay, I am reading it right. I thought I wasn't reading it right, but you're right. Steve.
.io is the new .com.
Oh, there you go. StevePemberton.io. That's what it is. I thought I was. I said, okay, well, I'll just jump to .com, but that's what I was reading and say, okay, maybe. But it is again Steve, just like his spell, STEVE. Pemberton, PEMBERTON.io. And if you go to that website, everything that we've been talking about, you'll get a chance to see. You can order products. As a matter of fact, we're at the point in the interview, Steve, where I shut the mic off and you have the opportunity to promote. And you can say anything with the exception of the dollar amount. That's why I wasn't going there just now a couple of minutes ago. But anything with the exception of a dollar amount, this is your opportunity to promote. Anybody you want to shout out, if you want to shout Karen out or your wife out or the kids out or whoever it is, anybody you want to shout out, this is your opportunity. I'm going to turn the mic off and you can promote. Book signings, anything, how to get in touch with you, so forth and so on.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. Well, the first person I want to shout out is you, Mark, for having me. I'm an hour behind, so this was an early rise. Grabbed a cup of coffee, and what a wonderful conversation it's been. So thank you for that. You can find me on any of the social media platforms. It's always at I, Steve Pemberton, or just do a simple Google search. There is another Steve Pemberton over there in England, but you put photos side by side and you realize who is who really, really quickly. So you can always find me there or at stevepemberton.io. The books themselves, all three of them really were written, for you. To be honest, I have a day job. So, me writing and speaking, or even, adapting the film, adapting the book to a film was all towards that greater good. You can also find the film, by the way, on Amazon Prime under the same title, A Chance in the World. You'll recognize a lot of the members in the cast, and you'll see a cameo by my family, my entire family, Tanya, my Jersey girl, and our children, Quinn, Vaughn, and Kennedy, who I always shout out. They have been and always continue to be my lighthouses.
All right. Well, I can tell you this. I have Amazon Prime, so I will be watching that film this evening. And since it's snowing and I don't have nowhere to go, I will be watching that tonight, guaranteed. And I will be in touch with you as well in terms of ordering some copies of the book. And it has just been an absolute pleasure to speak with you as well. We teased each other when we were on the phone about our fraternal affiliations. Steve is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. All right now, because we were I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, but he's with the red and white. I'm with the black and gold. You guys, what do they call you? A crimson and cream, correct?
Yeah, I was going to say we're the men, the crimson and cream. But as we all learned, it's true for a lot in the Divine Nine. It's all part of the same brotherhood.
That's right.
Sisterhood. Yeah.
That's absolutely right. But it has been a blast. Man, keep doing what you do. The Chance in the World, you said it's a foundation, right? You can make donations to it?
You can. You go to Steve Pemberton, again, stevepemberton.io. What I do is actually I'm very focused on children aging out of the foster care system, 25 to 30,000 a year due. Very, very challenging time and situation. And so whatever support I can provide, that's what I do through the foundation. Support nonprofits in my hometown as well. So I appreciate any support that others are willing to give. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, God has been leading my spirit to organizations like that to give a few dollars to. So I'm going to support that as well. It's probably later on today or tomorrow at some point I'll go on and I'll support that as well. I just think initiatives like that and what we're talking about and what we're doing is so critical. So what I've been doing of late is really choosing organizations of that, and like I said, it's not going to be like $1 million, but
doesn't have to be. Where we are with whatever we have.
That's right. So there you go. Every little bit counts. That's exactly right. So I'm going to do that as well. I will be watching the movie tonight. I will be in touch with you. Either I'll get your email if I don't have it from Karen, or either I'll have Karen put you back in touch with me. But one way or the other, because I need to get the links to you as well in terms of it'll be on my YouTube channel, and also you get an MP3 link. And once you receive those, you are free to do whatever you'd like with them. They're yours. Share them however you'd like.
That's wonderful. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this time with you this morning.
Same here. Well, I tell you what, man, I know it's early out there in Chicago. It's 8 here, so it's about 7 there. I don't know if you're an early riser, if you're going to go back to bed or whatever, but whatever it is, enjoy the rest of your day, your weekend, week, and again, as my mom can say, keep on keeping on.
That I'll do, Mark. Great being with you.
Same here. All right. Take care now. Well, as I leave you all the time, that is another episode of The Reading Circle with Marc Medley.